How's it going, everyone? So I want to show you how to build a online chat room by using a couple of libraries in the Svelte framework. So what I have here is I have two UIs, and on the left I can simply type in a message. It'll say hello world. And as I enter that, it's actually going to broadcast a message using a third-party library I'm using called Agora to send that message to the other page. And the other user can simply come back and say, like, what is up? Send as many messages as you want. Starts auto-scrolling to the bottom. And that's the basic idea. So basically anyone can join this room and start sending messages. I'm not differentiating between like who sent them, just you or them, but that's kind of what we're going to build today. So if you're interested in learning how to build that with Svelte and Agora, be sure to stick around. All right, so to get started, I'm going to spin up a bare bones Svelte project, which you can do by running this command. And inside this current directory I'm in, it should create all the files that I need. Just go ahead and pick yes, and then I'll say Agora RTM Svelte. And once that's done installing, you can go ahead and run an Npm Install to install all those third-party packages. And there's two packages that we're going to also additionally install to be able to create this application I just showed. The first one is called Agora RTM SDK, and the other one is UUID. So this Agora SDK is what's used for basically sending out these messages to the other tabs. And then UID is what we're going to be using for generating unique IDs. So once you have all those installed, I'm going to say npm run dev. And that should spin up a server over here and spin up a localhost browser we can kind of go to verify everything's working. Cool. So before we actually dive into this, there are some pre-set up things we have to do. So I'm going to go ahead and go to agora.io. I created an account already, and I went into projects and I created a project. Make sure when you create the project, let me just show you. If you go to create, make sure that you have it in testing mode. You can name it whatever you want. And once you've created that project, I can simply go to the config, and we're going to be using this app ID. So let's just go ahead and copy this. And going back to our Svelte project, if you're not familiar with Svelte, there's a source folder, and the main component that kind of loads everything is app.svelte. So let's just go ahead and look at that. To start off, I'm going to go ahead and just delete a bunch of this placeholder stuff and keep the styling. Actually, let's just delete any styling that we're not using as well. And let's just go ahead and try to get that started. I'm going to zoom out one because I think I'm zoomed in too far. So at the top here, I'm going to go ahead and import that third-party library that we talked about, Agora RTM. And I'm going to go ahead and import that from Agora RTM SDK. And then we're also going to import the v4 version of UUID, like so. And we'll see how this is used in just a bit. So once you've kind of imported those packages, what we want to do is we want to start setting up some constants. So the way Svelte is set up is you have these script tags, you have your HTML tag, and you have your style tag. So inside a script, I'm going to go ahead and say const app ID, and I'm going to paste in that app ID that we copied from that Agora dashboard. And secondly, I'm going to make a channel, and I'm going to name it WDJ. You can name this channel whatever you want. It'll kind of create the channel for you. I don't think there's anything else that needs to happen here. But let's just go ahead and do that. And a couple of more pre-set up things we have to do is we have to set up the client object from Agora so we can actually like connect to the WebSocket server. So I'm going to say Agora RTM, create instance, and go ahead and pass it the app ID here. So when this component in Svelte mounts, we want to actually start setting up a connection to that remote WebSocket server to, retrieve and send messages. So there's a couple things that we need to also import. I'm going to go ahead and import the onMount function from Svelte. We'll say import onMount from Svelte. And this allows us to call an onMount function down here with an async function where we can kind of do some initial setup for this component. The first thing you want to do is you want to log into this client so that you actually have the ability to like tell it what user you are. So I'm going to say await client.login. And this takes two arguments. The first one is a UUID, which we're just going to generate a new random one using this library we kind of brought in. So at the top here, I'm going to set let UID is equal to UID v4 and call that, and that'll generate a random UID for us. And we're going to pass that to login, and then for token, which is the second argument of the options. I'm going to set to null. You need to do this when you're doing like a test API, but when you have a legit production setup in a token service, you'd have to kind of generate a new token based on the user ID. But we're going to be covering that in this little tutorial here. So once you've logged in, you can simply get a new channel. So it's like await client.create channel. And I'm going to pass in the channel name. You can kind of use whatever channel name you want, but other users are going to have to basically connect to that same channel name if you want them to share messages. So once you've done that, I can say channel.join like so, and that'll actually connect like via WebSockets and other network broadcasts to that channel. So at this point, I mean, we should have, like when this component mounts, we should actually connect. And if we look at the logs, we should hopefully see some stuff happening. Obviously, there's nothing going on the page. But if I refresh this page, you'll see that it starts doing a bunch of RTM connections like this. Other than I do have an issue. I need to set channel up here. We're going to kind of cache this channel so we can use it later. So let's verify that I have that all set up correctly and just do a refresh real quick. All right, so you see that the client is actually connecting to the API, and it said that we successfully joined the WD channel. I think it's hiding some stuff in the console so that people can't potentially see over your shoulder certain IDs. Now that you've joined the channel, we need a way to basically have users send messages. Okay, so we're going to go down to probably here. I'm going to make a new function called send message. So function send message. And we're going to go ahead and say channel.sendMessage. This takes in a object that has a text, like I said, hello world, and then also a type. So I'm going to say text. I believe you can send other types of messages with this method. So we need to specify text here. And once you've done that, we should be able to basically make a button and a form object that should send this message. So down at the HTML section, I'm going to go ahead and put a form. Let's do this. And when that form submits, I'm going to go ahead and call that function. So I'm going to say form submit, and then I want to prevent default. The default behavior of a form when it submits is it refreshes your page. So I'm going to go ahead and call that send message. This is how you do it in Svelte. And inside that form, we kind of want two things. We want an input box, and we also want a button. And I'll just go ahead and put like a plus sign in that button for right now. But when someone types into the input box, we want to keep track of the text. So I'm going to go ahead and do a Svelte bind of value. This is how you can do like a two-way binding. So if I were to, for example, have a variable at the top called text, this input is going to bind to it, right? So when the user types into the input, it's going to update this variable using the reactivity that Svelte provides. So I'm just going to go up here and let text equal to an empty string for right now. So at that point, let's go back to the UI. And let's check if we were to just click send, it does print out that we sent a message, right? So everything's working, but the issue is that we're sending a hard-coded message to the backend. We want to actually grab the message text from this input when the user types in. Remember, this is already set up with reactivity. So what I can do is inside the send message function, I can actually just send the text that we typed into the input box. And there's a couple of other things that we probably want to check before we send the message. For example, do we want users to be able to send blank messages? Probably not. So I'm going to go ahead and say if text is equal to empty string, just return. And then what I'm also going to do is reset the text input back to an empty string as well when they're done sending the message. So let's verify some of this functionality. Go back to the UI. I'm going to go ahead and click on the send button and notice that the text clears out and we do send a message to the backend. So at this point, it's hard to see that like anything's working because we're not like, we don't have two tabs open. So let's work on trying to be able to render out any messages that we might get from the user. So in the on mount, I'm going to go ahead and add an event listener to channel. I'm going to say channel.on, and I'm going to say channel message. This is just how the Agora API is set up. There's certain events that fire off when you get messages. So we're going to say whenever we get a message, we want to call a function that takes an appear ID and a message. And we just need to append what we got back somewhere, right? So let's make an array up here. I'm going to say let messages is equal to an empty array. So we're going to go ahead and say messages is equal to messages, kind of doing like the spread operator here. And I'm going to append the message text like this. Text is equal to message.text. And then I'm also going to append the UID. So we call that peer ID, which will be like the unique ID that the user generated. Let's just go ahead and do this. And right now we don't have a way to like see this. So even if we get messages, we're not displaying it. So really what we want to do is we want to go down here and make a DOM element that we can actually put some messages in. So I'm gonna go ahead and make a panel and then kind of make out a messages div inside of that. And I'm gonna make a inner div inside of all that. And what we're gonna do is we are going to basically try to render out all those messages inside of that inner. I'll explain like why we did the inner stuff. It's mainly for padding and styling in a bit, but in Svelte, if you want to loop over every message that we get, you can do curly braces, hashtag each, and I can say messages as message. And then down at the bottom, we need to kind of end that for each loop. So anywhere that you type in some DOM elements here, it's going to loop over and create the template over and over again. Kind of similar to mustache or handlebars and stuff like that. So if you were to look at this, what we want to do is we want to create a new message div object every time we get a message. And for right now, let's just go ahead and render out message.text to make sure this all works. Okay, so again, this should loop over every message we get and just display it to the page. So let's go over here and I'm going to go ahead and make a new tab real quick. And I'm going to type in a couple of messages. So I'll say like 1, 2, 3. And I'm going to go over here and notice that those messages show up. So now we've successfully sent messages to the remote API, and that API is broadcasting those messages to other people in this chat room. Right now, there's an issue. When we send a message, it doesn't show up above our input box because we haven't added that functionality. The Agora API won't send you a message back for something that you sent yourself. Okay, so we need to kind of add that functionality. So what I'm going to do is when we send a message, we also need to append some type of message here like this. So I'm gonna go ahead and do this, and I'm just gonna append a message, and text is just gonna be equal to the text that was in the input. So before we test this out, I do want to refactor some of this code because it is a little messy. We have duplicate code in 2 places. I'm gonna make a new function called append message, and all this is gonna do is run that code, and it's gonna take in a message here. So let's just go ahead and do this. All right, so instead of calling this code twice in 2 different places, what we can do now is just go ahead and append an object like so. And I'm going to go ahead and copy this similar code. I'm going to say append message. Go ahead and save that. So hopefully now when I type myself, those messages will show up for myself. And then if I go over here, my own messages will also pop up. Cool. So there's a couple of more things I wanted to kind of add in. So remember in the demo I showed you, we wanted to show either you or them based on who sent the message. So luckily this message object has a UID on it. So what we can actually do is inside this message div, I'm going to go ahead and do some conditional logic here. I'm going to say if the message UID is equal to my current user UID, then we are going to render out a div called user self. And inside of this, I'm going to put you, and then I'm going to put a face like that. And then otherwise, I'm going to say else, we are going to render out a them. I'm going to say user them, and then I'm going to put them here. And then go ahead and end that if statement like so. And then down here, I'm just going to go ahead and put another div here called text, just so that we have like separation in terms of divs so we can style them pretty easier down the road. So let's hopefully this all works. Let's save this file, and we're going to go back and just type in some messages. So you, and then over here it says them. So now we actually have a way to see like who sent the message, who's it from, etc. All right, so now we're going to do some styling. So I'm probably just going to copy some styling in because a lot of this is very tedious, but I want to change the background color to make it like a linear gradient. You can see here we have a cool little background. And then we want to basically style this whole area that have like a little panel. So it's kind of like, you know, a messages panel. So down here in styling, I'm going to go ahead and paste a new styling for panel, which remember, this is the panel that we created. And just to give you a quick walkthrough of the important stuff, the obvious stuff like background and box shadow, that's just for styling. But the important thing is we wanted to give it a height. We want to also make sure that it has a flex box in it so we can kind of style stuff vertically between the input box and the actual messages. And then I believe there is, and I think that's about the main things. You can look through here and try to like play around with it to see like what it does. But if you look over at the panel, we actually have a panel now. And inside of this panel, I'm not really sure why the input box is dropped down. I think the form actually needs to be put inside of messages. So let's go ahead and, or sorry, it needs to be put inside the panel. So let's go ahead and put the form inside the panel so it's actually nested inside. And what we're going to do is we want to style the messages section. So remember there's like the input box at the bottom, and then there's going to be a panel up here that has all the messages in it. So let's go back to the styles. I'm going to paste in some more CSS. And hopefully you guys aren't frustrated that I pasted in some code. But again, CSS is really tedious, and it'll turn a tutorial into like an extra 20 minutes just to see me type this stuff out. But the most important thing is we gave this thing an overflow of scroll so that as a bunch of messages come in, the panel will automatically scroll and hide some of those at the top. Okay, so we have a panel here now, and we can go ahead and try to style out the form down here too. So for the form, I'm actually going to paste in 3 different stylings. The main thing about all these is that the form is going to be a display of flex so that we can basically make the input box be full screen. And then we have the input, which I just kind of added some padding and some height to it. And then we have a button for the plus, right? So if I go over to the page, you'll see that that will just, you know, make this full width, make it a little bit higher, make the font size a little bit bigger so the user can see what they're typing. So the last part is like the actual messages and the padding inside this panel are a little bit, they need some love, right? So let's just go back to the code real quick, and I'm going to go ahead and do .inner and say padding of 10 pixels. And that should kind of add some padding to the inner panel. And there's a couple of other things that we need to do as well. So when the message comes in, we'll do this, and I'm going to say text align is left, because remember all the text was centered. I'm going to say display of flex, and then I'm going to say margin bottom of 6 pixels. Okay, what that's going to do is basically as the messages come in, it's going to space them nicely and put them to the left of the page. One thing that we're missing is coloring for you and them. So remember we added different classes for those. So I'm going to go over here and just say user self color is green. And then I'm also going to do user.them as color of red. All right, so let's go back and let's type in some messages, hello world. And then I'm going to go ahead and open up the other panel and say testing. And there you have it. So that's basically most of it. There is an issue though. Let's keep on typing. Notice that it doesn't automatically scroll down to the bottom. So there is a little thing that we have to do when new messages are appended. So I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to that append message function that we wrote. And a little hack that I had to figure out is I'm gonna say request animation frame, which basically tells JavaScript to wait until the browser has already rendered that new message that came in. And we need to basically force the scroll top to go down to the bottom of the div. Okay, so how you can do that in Svelte is you can actually attach references to DOM elements. So it's very similar to like Angular or anything like that, where I can go down and actually find the panel. Or I guess it's called the messages div. Remember, the messages is a thing that's auto scrolling, I believe. And I'm going to put a ref here. I'm going to say bind this is equal to messages ref, like so. And that's going to bind this DOM element to this variable at the top. So let's just go ahead and inside of this request animation frame, I'm going to say messages ref scroll top is equal to messages ref dot scroll height. This is how you can do it in vanilla JavaScript to basically force the scroll bar to go to the bottom as new messages come in. And it's as I type, you will see that it automatically scrolls as messages come in. Now there is a little bug with this that I'm not going to fix, but if you were to scroll to the top and then a user types in like hello, notice that it's going to force this user back down to the bottom. That could be a breaking UX change, so you might have to add some additional logic not to have that break, but there you have it. We have 2 different panels that are sending messages back and forth to each other using the Agora RTM library. And I definitely recommend you check this project out. A lot of cool stuff in here. You can kind of send messages. You can also do live webcam and audio streaming to different panels as well. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed watching this tutorial. If you have any comments, leave a comment below, give me a thumbs up, and be sure to subscribe if you're new to this channel. Also, you can join my Discord if you want to ask me questions directly. And that's about it. Have a good day and happy coding.